Hi and then welcome to my book corner. A little bit late, but we do have our September wrap up for you today. It felt like a bit of a tough month. I felt like I was falling into a reading sprint, and then when I've looked at my reading stats, it doesn't quite support that. But we'll get into a little bit about why I'm feeling a bit like that at the moment. It was very much a month of two separate halves in terms of the amount that I read versus the amount that I listened to. So we have the amazing new stats from Storygraph to dive into here as well. So we'll start off with that one. And straight off the bat, we have a total of 13 books read or listened to during the month, which is a little bit more than normal. A couple of them were quite short though, which we will touch on in a bit. That is a total of 2,233 pages. Just under 30 hours, with an average rating given of 3.98. We'll go over all the books individually in a moment. In terms of the actual genres, 6 fell under fantasy, 6 fell under romance. Then you have 2 that came under sci-fi, with 3 also hitting YA and LGBTQIA+ tags. In addition to that, we have 1 that hit manga and 1 that hit erotica as well. As you can see, it was a very up and down month in terms of actual how much I read day to day. And when I ended up reading stuff, you can see a very clear switch towards the back end of the month. Of the books that I read, 46% were digital, 38% were physical, and 15% were audio. So there we go. And for a quick preview of where we sit on the ratings, this is a list of the books that I read this month. The Wishing Stone does now have a cover, but it is not actually currently attached to the Goodreads Storygraph page. So, but it's a beautiful cover, and I will throw it on screen for you to check out as well. So there we go. But what about the books one-on-one that I read? So let's jump into them all individually. So the first book I read this month was Compound Fracture by Andrew Joseph White. This is White's third full-length novel. It is once again a YA horror. And this was pretty good. It didn't quite resonate with me as much as the previous 2 titles had done. Part of that is due to the settings, and part of that is due to the character. Nothing to do with the way they are written. It's just I couldn't quite hook on as much as I did before. This is set in modern day America, small town America, with a main character who is self-described as a trans autistic communist teen. And you have a background of this being rural America, where you have a load of issues with funding for education and law enforcement. You have a little bit of political corruption going on here as well. And you have a long-term blood feud going on between the Abernathy family, of which our main character is a member of, and the family of the local sheriff, which goes back to around 100 years when there was a miners' revolt in this town led by Saint Abernathy. After being discovered with some evidence that proves that the sheriff was involved in some dubious activities, let us say, it's discovered that they have these pictures and they are battered to within an inch of their life. And you have a situation there where our main character is sort of torn between trying to survive and trying to out the sheriff for what he really is. And you have this level of tension that builds throughout, especially as they begin to find people who actually feel similar to them as well, and quite put on upon by the local sheriff. It's not as grisly as previous Andrew Joseph White books. It does have a more contemporary setting. It is once again very well written. It has strong themes of the abuse of political power, the systematic defunding of necessary services in certain areas, which I believe is a major issue in the US as well, more so than we have in the UK to an extent as well. And this sense of difficulty for the main characters, they're trying to come out as trans as well at the start of the book, and dealing with the fallout of that as well. I do recommend checking out the content warnings for this one, just to be on the safe side, because again, much like Andrew Joseph White's previous books, they are very good, but they do deal with some heavy topics and some graphic imagery. So please bear that in mind going on. If you want to check out my review, it is linked up above. Go give it a check out. Well, that was book number 1. I gave that one a 4.25 stars. Next up, we have Celestial Monsters by Aiden Thomas. This is book 2 in the Sunbearer Trials duology. This is a shoe-in for my favourite book of the year. It's a 5-star read for me. Absolutely loved it. Now, I am a little bit biased because I absolutely adored the Sunbearer Trials in terms of its world building and the chemistry between the characters. This continues that, but with a far darker undertone. Because obviously this deals with the fallout of betrayal at the end of the Sunbearer Trials, and our 3 main characters, inverted commas, because there is another one worth mentioning in here, of Tio, who is one of the 2 POV characters in here, Nia and Aurelio, go off on a quest to restore the power of the Sunstones and basically get rid of the Obsidian Gods and restore peace and order to their realm. And you have this interesting growing relationship pains between Aurelio and Tio, as well as Tio is getting more and more infatuated. Well, you have more layers of depth added to the side characters here, which, whilst the great thing in the first book was the chemistry, this begins to show some of their insecurities in themselves, especially when you consider these are meant to be the children of the gods. And the golds in particular, because of the hierarchical system, have been pretty much untouchable. And when some of that support network is pulled away, you have this second guessing. There's some really strong moments in here where they're trying to help people, but they're being blamed for everything that's gone on, understandably, because of things that have happened. But also this deconstruction of reliance in society on other people helping you. So you have a number of points in here where the cities that are doing best are the cities where their overseeing gods were less hands-on and more encouraging to allowing humanity itself to sort their own problems rather than relying on the protection of the gods and the gods' children. It's a fascinating look at the advantages of collectivism. I really do love the heart of this. It's also worth mentioning that there is a second point of view character in here. That is the betrayal character from book 1. I'm not going to name them here because that's a bit of a spoiler in case you've not read it. And you basically have them doing 1 chapter, then Tio does 2, and they're coming at it from different sides of the planet at this point. And you have a similar sort of arc for them. You have the arc of acceptance on who they are, acceptance of what they've done, dealing with the guilt of the betrayal that they have committed, and realizing that sometimes the honeyed words are precisely just that. Words, not promises. The world building continues to be great. The focus on food continues in here as well, which I do like as a world building tool. It really does help cement the world. I really appreciate that. Probably my book of the year. Celestial Monsters got an easy 5 stars from me. Next up is one of a number of free reads that I had from indie authors. These are available when you sign up for their newsletters, so you can go check them out yourself if you wish. The first one is First Date by Rex Burke. So this is a prequel to the Odyssey Earth trilogy, which I'm currently 2 books into. And this is set before book 1, Orphan's Planet, and it focuses on 2 of the characters from that series. The first one being Captain Juno Washington, who is the captain of the mission at the start of Orphan Planet, and the sentient AI before they were truly sentient, Reeves, or as they're known in this, Omnio, which was their original name. And it basically covers the period of Juno going through the interviews, training, getting the job, and what that looked like, and getting to know their co-pilot and co-lead, which is the AI of Omnio, this special AI more advanced than any other in the world. And what's fascinating here is the growth of Omnio closer towards the character that becomes Reeves at the start of the books. On its own, this is fine. If this is part of your planned read for the Odyssey Earth trilogy, this does add a number of little lore points and background things to both Reeves and to Captain Washington as well, which do enhance the enjoyment of those books. I did give this a 4 stars, but that is conditional on you actually reading past this book into the Odyssey Earth series. It gives you a good sense of the level of humour and the interactions that you will find in Burke's books, which we'll talk about in another book very shortly. Really, really strong short story that does build more lore and adds a little bit more context, especially to Captain Washington. You know, Juno's decision to go on this trip and why is contextualized better here than it is in those other books and explains a lot of her motives as well. Really enjoyed it. I think if you're going to read the book, you absolutely should read this one. And as we're talking about Rex Burke, I was very kindly sent an arc for Third Loch from the Sun by Rex Burke, which came out in September. This is a fantasy sci-fi that again continues the very whippy, wholesome feel that you get through all of Rex's books that I've read so far. What I really love about these books is how sort of comfy they feel. This is comfy sci-fi. This is based up in Scotland, in this remote island where this London kid decides to go and work on basically a tourist hotel. It's like a guide and helper for the summer holidays for a bit of extra spending money, to get there to find out that the ad should have been taken down years ago and nobody goes to the island anymore. But the island is harbouring a secret that is largely being guarded by the person on the island who's basically seen as a local alcoholic nut job since their wife passed away several years earlier. But is there any truth to their claim? Well, you'll have to read the book to find out. This and the next book I'm going to cover have both had been included in an ARC video, which I will link above as well for you to check out. Again, though, the sense of humour that digs through this and the idea of this southern Englishman stuck in rural Scotland, where they're seen as, in the most good-natured way possible, the old enemy, is always a fun sort of juxtaposition. It put me in mind, bizarrely in some ways, of Hot Fuzz, with some of the interactions there with like the almost country bumpkin aesthetic, for want of a better word, and the deep accents playing off against the city boy from London, so out of the depth and not understanding what anybody's saying or what's really going on because life is so different there. Always love that sort of bounce and aesthetic. Well worth checking out. That's Third Loch from the Sun by Rex Burke. The other arc that I have been sent this month was for The Wishing Stone by Adam Holcombe. This is a follow-up to a necromancer called Gam Gam. We'll be talking about this series in a little bit more detail because two of the other stories link to that as well. This was really, really good. This releases in October, and this continues the story of Gam Gam and Mina as they find their way back to the capital city of the not the Celestial Empire. That's not what it's called. The Immortal Empire? I can't remember the exact wording off the top of my head. And Gam Gam discovers rumours of something called the Wishing Stone. This is a magical stone that can basically grant anybody whatever wish they require. However, it only works once and it has a long recharge period. And what I really like in this is the creative use of Gam Gam's magic in particular. I like the further world building of the ideas of the different types of magic and how people can only have one type so far at any rate, which I do like. But there's some really creative use of Gam Gam's necromancy in here, which I don't think I've seen anywhere else, but I really appreciate. The antagonist of the piece, their introduction and the way they are straight off the bat is so deplorable. This is how to make a dislikable villain 101. And you can actually understand their motives as well very easily. And you get a very smart kind of lore dump in here that explains a lot of the stuff that's going on. It's especially well done. And the other interesting thing is that while this is the Chronicles of Gam Gam, once again, the focus of this story isn't necessarily on her. It's more on Mina's thing. Gam Gam very much is the secondary character who enables the narrative rather than being the focus of it, which is an interesting way to take something like this and is a fascinating way of building the side characters out. There's some great moments for Nugget the Familiar as well. There's new characters introduced, and you know, we all know that little old woman who everybody loves. She'll go into the roughest pubs and everybody knows, and she knows the name of all their children. That is the Gam Gam character in a nutshell. I love it. This is wholesome fantasy with an element of horror. I am doing a first chapter read for Gam Gam, which should be up on the channel by now. If it is, I will link that above as well. Again, my review for both of these is also linked in the description, so go give them a check out. Speaking of a necromancer called Gam Gam, there are two prequel stories available that you can access for free through Adam's website. So the first one is The Night Revenant, and the second one is Nugget's 10th Life. I really like The Night Revenant. I gave this a 4.25 stars out of 5. This is basically set just after Gam Gam has left Magic University and has heard tales of a Revenant haunting an area of land between two cities. And basically, Gam Gam goes there to free this area of this problem, but it's done in such a wholesome way again. It starts off with this really spooky forest and this dark spectre coming upon this helpless old woman in the woods, who isn't obviously as helpless as they appear. And this old woman is just sat there, magical field around them, so the spectre can't get to them, while just knitting away. I think it's a pair of socks or a scarf. I think it's socks. While this spirit of vengeance and evil is just smashing against the magical barriers, and just the whole patience of, don't worry, I'm just going to talk to you. All I want to do is talk to you. And it builds on that wholesome nature of Gam Gam as somebody who wants to help people in the best way that they can. And that's something that flags through all of them. And it has a really wholesome end as well, which I really appreciate. The other book is called Nugget's 10th Life. This focuses on Gam Gam's familiar, Nugget the undead cat. And it's their life before they die and become a familiar. And it's a fascinating read. I don't like it quite as much as Night's Revenant. I gave this a 3.75 stars. Well, it basically looks at what Nugget's life was like before, how they protected their sister and their nephews and the scrapes that they got into, as all cats do, specifically with a band of calicos, and all the near misses that Nugget had before they finally caught up to them and Nugget became an undead familiar. It builds out a lot more of Nugget's character. Nugget is the bestest, boniest cat in the world. And again, much like Night's Revenant and First Date as well for the Odyssey Earth trilogy, this adds a little bit more of a layer to the lore and the personality of things going on, which I always appreciate. So both of those books are available for free. Short stories, I should say, are available for free to read on Adam's website. I highly recommend you go check those out as well. Next, we have another indie title. This is Cloti's Song by Dani Finn. Again, we have a first chapter read on the channel. Go check this out. This is very explicit. This is an 18+ book. And what I like about this is the fact that it does a number of things that I've not seen very often in books that have a focus on romance or erotica. And that's not to say that this book falls under those, because this is very much a fantasy first book, but those elements are in here regularly and often. But you have an older group of protagonists, specifically Cloti being the named character. The sort of four main characters in this are all around middle-aged and upwards, and you actually do have a open polyamorous relationship being portrayed in a really wholesome way here, which isn't something you see very often within literature in general, especially fantasy though. And this is a fascinating world set in a city of the mayor that is currently under occupation by human forces, and you have characters that are trying to find their way in the world, while you have extremist groups basically trying to force the invaders out, which is causing repercussions. You have a fascinating meditative magic system and a method of sharing this sort of meditation as well through group meditations. The magic system is really fascinating, and the all-embracing love of this novel is what really, really spoke to me. Now, what I will say is there are a lot of explicit scenes in here, and whilst I don't mind explicit scenes, and they all do lead into the story and further the story in some way, there was too much spice for me personally. And again, the spice is really, really well written, and it's not just there to be there. It all informs the story in some way, or furthers aspects of the story, or plays into the characters and what the characters are doing. It's not just we need spice now. But there was a lot in here. So this drops down to a 4 stars from me personally. I did thoroughly enjoy it. The world is really interesting to me. I am going to dive into more books at a later date. Well, that's Cloti's Song by Dani Finn. So that was the first of my Smuttember reads, which I did with Noah over on the Bookworm. Check him out, link down below. The next one was Therapy Games, Volume 2. This is a BL yaoi manga. More explicit than number 1. It continues the interesting interaction between your two main characters in terms of their own personal vulnerabilities, and especially with Fallout from Book 1. You have these moments of, especially at the beginning, this mild tension at the start where one of them goes missing, and it turns out it's just because saving battery and put phone on silent, which I love the irony of that one in the modern age, because 30 years ago, if you couldn't get in touch with someone, they'll get back to you later. Now it's like, I've sent them 37 missed calls and them not answered. Oh my god, they must be dead. And that sort of dynamic amuses me probably more than it should do. I do like the two main characters, and this does link into another series, and I can't think what it's called as well, but it introduces characters from them as well, as there is direct family links which happens, which is hilarious to me. There is a lot of spice in here. It is very well drawn. I just think this is a surprisingly sweet, if pretty explicit BL manga that's worth checking out. There is another spin-off series from this, which I am going to pick up at some point, but it was a lot of fun. Speaking of wholesome and mildly explicit, and by mildly I mean very, the next one is an anthology collection. This is Scary Stories to Tingle Your Butt, 7 Tales of Gay Terror from Chuck Tingle. I gave this a 3.25 stars, not because anything is particularly bad here, but it doesn't always work for me, if that makes sense. Take that as you will. So the books in here are Bigfoot Pirates Haunt My Balls, Vampire Night Bus Pounds My Butt, which is my favourite of the stories in here, Angry Man Pounded by the Fear of His Latent Gayness Over a Dinosaur Transitioning into a Unicorn, My Ass is Haunted by the Gay Unicorn Colonel, The State of California Stalks My Butthole, The Curse of Bigfoot Butt Camp, and Reamed by my reaction to the title of this book. That last one really baffled me more than any of the others. It just threw me for a bit of a loop. These are all fine. They're about 25 pages long. Not even, in fact, that's being polite. They're not 25 pages long. The entire book is 82 pages. So you're looking at maybe 15 pages a story. They are fine for what they are. Vampire Night Bus I did really like because conceptually it's just completely balmy. But again, this is Chuck Tingle. This is talking about how you are valid in who you are, your beliefs and your attractions, and how love is real and it can conquer pretty much anything, which I love the wholesome message that still comes through. Despite the fact that these are explicit, these don't waste any time going from characters meet to explicit actions happen. The reason it drops is because once you've read one of these explicit scenes, there's not massive differences between them, which is a bit of a weird criticism to make. But I felt like I was reading the same scene over and over again, just with different people involved. But that's probably because I just read them all back to back, and there were 7 of them. So, but you know what? They're good, they're fun, they're wholesome. If you want a quick erotic read, any one of those stories will do. And it's, again, under 90 pages, so you can probably, don't word it like that, you could probably read them all in a pretty sharp space of time. The next one is kind of my biggest letdown for the month. It's Leather and Lark by Brynne Weaver. I read Butcher and Blackbird earlier this year. Absolutely loved it. On hindsight, I gave it a bit of a lower score than I should do, and I've actually bumped it up because of the chemistry between the two main characters. This follows Lachlan Kane and I can't remember her first name, but Lark Montague, from it was both side characters from Butcher and Blackbird. Lark was Sloane's best friend, and Lachlan is the brother of the main character whose name I have forgotten, but never mind. And it's fine. It takes a bit of time to get its footing in here, and part of that is it because you have two characters that initially are not especially likable, and you have brief moments of chemistry early on, which then get smothered by the fact that this is kind of an enemies to lovers romance, and then an element of forced proximity because they go into an arranged marriage to basically stop Lachlan being assassinated. So the chemistry doesn't really kick in until the back half of the book. Now, when it does kick in, it's good. It is not the same level as Butcher and Blackbirds, though. The highlight of this book, bizarrely, is when Sloane appears. And as a character, she just pops off the page in a way that the other characters do. There are some scenes in here that are really well done, though. There is spicy scenes in here. They're quite late in the book. Later, I think, than they were in Butcher, if I remember correctly. You also have the food warnings in here. Didn't feel like much of anything, if I'm completely honest. It didn't spoil pizza or smoothies for me. It's a bit gruesome, but it felt like it was kind of shoehorned in early on, and it didn't really fit what was going on. There was no build up to it, which caught a little bit of its impact. It was solidly written. It just didn't blow me away, and part of that is because I liked book one so much, but the on-page chemistry wasn't great, and also the overarching threat of the Phantom in the background felt like it wrapped up far too neatly and easily at the end, and I didn't buy that because the character felt like they just did. Considering how smart they were made out to be, their approach to like the final set piece was just dumb, like full on just stupid. But it was fine. I'm still going to buy book 3 when it's out next year. I have more hope for that one because it follows the third brother and his girlfriend, so I'm excited for that. But bit of a letdown. I gave it 3.25 stars. It's not bad. It just wasn't anywhere near as good as Butcher. That leaves me with my 2 audiobooks for this month. The first one was a buddy read that I did with Baddies Rad, and that is Serpents at the Wings of Night by Clarissa Broadbent. I enjoyed this quite a bit. My criticism of it is that it felt a bit formulaic, but this is a Hunger Games but with vampires scenario, basically, which I do really like. I like the romance between the 2 main characters. This is all told from one POV. I like the various different relationships that are built up through this. I like the banter and the wit. My criticism is the fact that this book didn't surprise me in any way. There's a character introduced quite early on in one scene, and then you don't see them again until quite late on, and it's like, why are you introduced? Oh, they're going to be involved in the finale, and I figured out very quickly that, well, this person's going to do this person's going to do this person's behind it. There was the odd moment that was a surprise, and it gave resolutions that I didn't necessarily expect, although I expected certain types of resolutions, so it did fit into those. But it was a good, fun book. It was an enjoyable read. The narration was hit and miss for me. It primarily came in when the narrator was voicing some of the secondary characters, and the voices didn't quite fit. But when they were voicing the main 2 characters, I think the job was really well done. Overall, this gets a solid 3.75 stars out of 5. I have picked up the next book in the series, so I will be checking that one out at some point as well. Because I want to see more of the world. I want a little bit more depth, because the most interesting thing for me here was the actual world itself and the clan warfare between the vampires and their approach to, we'll call it resource collection of blood, for want of a better word. So, curious to read more. Solid book, just didn't quite blow me away. Finally, we have Lightlark by Alex Aster. I didn't know going into this that this had caused a bit of an uproar during its marketing campaign, especially over on TikTok, where it was described as being like this book or that book, notably Akatar, I believe, which is a book that I don't like anyway, so it's probably a good job I didn't see that. But also quotes being used in the marketing that were not actually in the books, and certain things saying that, well, this happens in the books and it doesn't. However, I didn't know any of that going in, and this was okay. There's an interesting concept here of the idea you've got all these different types of magic that link to different kingdoms, but there's a curse, and they need to break the curse, so every 100 years there's a competition so that they can try and break the curse. Not quite sure why it's every 100 years. Maybe that is part of the curse conditions. I can't remember. Again, it's quite predictable. You can see where the love interests are going to be. I very, very early on went, there's something not right with that character, and I was proved right on that as well. But conceptually, this is interesting. I don't particularly like the main character. They're spiky, which fits in with their magical nature, or, well, there's a twist on that one. But there was just something slightly off. And again, there was a reveal to do with that as well later on. But it's a solid, fast-moving, well-narrated, because this was an audiobook as well. Sort of fairy tale-esque with a hint of romance tale. And I like the idea of, well, we're together to try and break the curse, but maybe one of us has to die. Adds an interesting level of tension to it, which I really liked. It's just a bit predictable. If you tell me someone is a bad guy and they're tall, dark, and handsome, they're not the bad guy. They are the love interest. That's just how it works in these books. We all know it. Do something different, please. But overall, it was solid. Probably not going to continue with the series, but I'm not sorry that I listened to it. So there we go. That is my reading wrap up for September. A mixed month. Some amazing books, some disappointing books. Nothing actively bad though, which I appreciate. But what I would love to know is, what are you planning to read for October? Let me know in the comments below, and I will hopefully catch some of you soon.